we bring in a friend who we've known for years and years and years. He's an author, relationship therapist, Dr. R.G. Allen Wilson.
Some expert advice on how we can all talk to them. Joining us now is relationship expert Dr. R.G. Allen Wilson. She's the author of Courageous Conversations Connect. Good morning, R.G.
Doctor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Janelle. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
And as we mentioned, a lot of people just dealing with anxiety during all of this. What are your suggestions?
Some of the things that we need to remember is that this is temporary. This is temporary inconvenience for long-term gain. And as long as we stay healthy, Janelle, then everything else is recoverable.
Talk to your children about what's happening right now. What are the best ways to do that?
There's some do's and don'ts, right? So you want to tell them that you're going to be here. We're going to be okay. Kids want to know that they're secure and they're safe. So predictability, structure, and consistency. You also want to let them know you have a plan. And even if you don't have a plan, tell them that you're working on one. And good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Dr. RG here, yours truly for Courageous Conversations Connect Space, where we're having our quarantine talks. Welcome to the show. So we're going to let a few more people get on this morning. It is June 22nd, 2020, and this is our 15th week of quarantine, almost 4 months of quarantine. I think we've moved to yellow here in Philadelphia. Perhaps we are going to be moving to green soon, but right now I think, barbershops and salons are open back up and curbside restaurants are opening back up. And so we want to talk about that and still staying safe as well. So more people are joining. Do me a favor, going over to YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube page. Ask Dr. RG, AskDrArgie. Hit the notification bell. Also, if you're on Facebook, not just on this thread, but on Facebook in the message section, type in subscribe. And then when you get the notification, reply to it so that you can get all of our notifications and our promotions. And so listen. We got a lot to talk about because a lot happened over the weekend, and we're going to wish everybody happy Father's Day. We're going to do our breathing exercises, and we're going to talk about Juneteenth celebration as well as racial healing. So good morning, IG family. Good morning, YouTube family. Good morning, Facebook family. We're going to take a quick break from our sponsors, and we will be right back. So please stay with us. Well, good morning. This is Dr. RG here, and we are in our Courageous Conversations Connect Space quarantine talks. Today, really all week, we are going to be talking about racial trauma and healing talks. That's like the focal point of all of our conversations this week, racial trauma. Last week, we were talking about racial healing. We had Mel Robbins on Monday. We had our pastor, Dr. Alan E. Waller, on Thursday. And this morning, all of us are going to be on, and we're talking about racial trauma and healing talks. Those are the talks that we want to have. And specifically today, I wanted to open up the dialogue about both Juneteenth, as well as Father's Day, as well as how do we continue to dismantle the racism, the systemic racism on every level, quite frankly. This is a conversation that we've been waiting to really have for 401 years for the Black and brown people, right? The disenfranchised, the people that have been othered, many of us who have felt discriminated against and subjugated and felt that, many white people have felt that they were superior and that we are inferior. But we also deal with not just externalized racism, but internalized racism, as my good friend, Dr. Marlene Watson talks about in her book, facing the Black shadow. So there's just a lot to unpack. You know, we're talking about 401 years of trauma, and that is no small feat to unpack just in, you know, a moment, if you will, a moment in history. This is a movement that we are continuing to forge ahead, and everybody has to play their role. And so I want to go ahead and good morning, Charlotte. Good morning, Hanga. I hope I'm saying that correctly. We have a new crew member. Remember, crew stands for Connecting Relationships for Epic Wins. So we got a new crew member, Hanga. Thanks for joining. And we have Gilda on. Good morning, Gilda. Good morning, Diane. She's on. So let's just get into it. We're going to wait for a few more people to come in before we do our exercise. But good morning, IG family, YouTube family, Facebook family. Make sure you tag a friend. Make sure you share this video so that other people who cannot watch in real time experience it. This is our community give back. Morgan and I, who really just wanted initially almost 4 months ago, back in March, when we first went into quarantine, we just wanted to create a space for people to talk about everything that they were experiencing. We did not realize that we were creating this healing space, if you will, for these two viruses, COVID-19, right? That we've been dealing with for about 4 months, but we know it's been here longer than 4 months because, you know, I think maybe I got sick back in November and wasn't feeling well. Many of my other family members, and I might have had it back then. I'm not really sure. Maybe I'll wait for the antibody test to come out and see. But we've been dealing with this for about 6 months or so. And we've been dealing with the other virus, right? The other virus of systemic and systematic oppression and racism that is structural, right? At its very core, right? That all of these structures have been created in order to keep Black people oppressed, Black and brown people, and to keep many white people elevated in a place of power, in a place of privilege, quite frankly, in a place of unearned entitlement. And we got to stay in this fight. And it is a fight. It's a fight for the long haul, for equity and inclusion for everyone, not just a swath of people in the United States, but for everyone, so that we hold up the bargain, right? The deal was this was supposed to be an equitable and perfect union for everyone, not just for a certain grace of people, but for everyone. So this is a conversation of healing that we need to be having. Good morning, Sydney. Thank you for joining. Thank you for, Janelle's on. Thank you for joining, Janelle. As we talk this morning about racial trauma and healing, right? This is our racial trauma and healing talks. We're going to be talking about that all week. But today, specifically, I want to hear your stories about how you celebrated Juneteenth. Did you celebrate it? What was your Father's Day like? Like, did you honor the father that you have now? Is he still here? Has your father transitioned and you honored the fact that he was in your life? Did your father not? Was he not in your life? Right? I read a post by Pastor Corey Johnson that was really powerful yesterday about the fact that the last time that he talked to his father was on Father's Day, but that he had been absent in his life, a good portion of his life, and that he had made had some forgiving engagements with his father, at least that one last time. And then about a couple of weeks later, his father died, and he entered into a process of healing. So I want to hear these stories. This is for you, this space, to talk about your recovery, your healing. If your father was in your life, wonderful. My dad was, and we celebrated my father, and I'll share that story with you a little bit later. But if he wasn't, then how have you forgiven your father so that you don't carry that into the next generation? Good morning, Autumn. Good morning, Larissa. So you all know what we do. Right around 10:10, we get into our postures to do our breathing exercises. So what I want you to do is share with us, IG family, Facebook family, YouTube family. Go on and tag a friend, share this post or this video, let everyone know that we're on. We do our breathing. Good morning, Teresa, and Facebook family. Put your thumbs to your middle finger, or your one hand over the next hand, or you put each hand on the side of you, and get in a relaxing posture. And I want you all to tell me who you're breathing for and who you're breathing with. Today, I'm in the past, I've been breathing for George Floyd's family, Breonna Taylor's family, Ahmaud Arbery's family, and now, yes, for Rayshard Brooks's family. And quite frankly, all of the other Black and brown people who have been assaulted at the hands of people who have unearned power, whether they be police officers, white police officers, crooked police officers, or whether it be people who just have hate in their heart for Black and brown people. And I'm also right now breathing for the 3 people last week who have been found hung from trees. They say suicides. I say lynchings are happening now. And Bubba, we'll talk a little bit about that, NASCAR race driver, they found a noose in his, I guess the place where they fix the garage of the bay where they fix the cars or whatever, so these are scare tactics, and we need to be praying for our people and breathing for them. By the way, COVID-19 is still out there, you guys. So we need to be praying for the essential workers that are still out there on the ground, taking care of people who are going to get sick. So those are the people that I am praying for and breathing for. Who are you breathing for in this moment? We're going to take 5 deep breaths. We're going to hold it for 8 seconds. We're going to breathe in through our nose and out through our mouth. We hold it 8 seconds to honor George Floyd and the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that that the knee was on his neck. Larissa says, I'm breathing for justice, righteousness, and peace in this nation. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Charlotte says, I don't celebrate Father's Day. My father has passed away. Gotcha. I understand that. Charlotte. And Doritha says, or Jamel says, we have been having church on the block for the past few weeks. I saw that on Facebook. Yesterday, we honored the fathers and gave them gift cards. God is truly blessing obedience. Awesome. I saw that on Facebook where you guys were having church on the block. That's awesome. So let's do it. We're a little bit late, 10:12, but let's get into our posture and do our breathing. Diane says, breathing for Lisa, battling cancer, and Bubba. Thank you for that. And we're going to be breathing for Lisa as well. All right. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in through the nose. I went to 9. I'm sorry. Breathe in. Out. Breathe in. Out. Breathe in. One last time. Out. Make it count. Breathe in. And out. Wonderful. That felt good. Please do that throughout the day. We need to get the oxygen into our lungs, into our brain, into our essential organs. We need to breathe out the toxins, the carbon dioxide, but also fear and worry and pain and frustration and anger and resentment and disappointment and all those negative thoughts, and breathing in peace and love and serenity, okay, and kindness and care. Listen, love trumps hate all day long, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year. Love trumps hate. All right. So what's your story? How have you experienced systemic racism in the past or recently? How have you experienced Father's Day? How did you experience Juneteenth? We know that Juneteenth is a very interesting process when we think about Juneteenth, because we know that years ago they didn't have, 5G, right? We didn't have social media. We couldn't get messages across the globe in a millisecond. And so the slaves didn't know they were slaves for 2.5 years after the Civil War had ended and where slaves were emancipated. And then when they got the word, they had a caveat, which is now you're free. Slaves been free for 2.5 years, but now you could get paid a little bit from your slave master, but you can't congregate on the corners and you can't congregate in spaces. So are you really free, right? Yet we still celebrate because at this point we are still fighting for our freedom, and Juneteenth is a representation of the fight, and the fight looks different now. Our young people in the streets. Teresa says, breathing for my husband to be restored to our Lord Jesus Christ. Gotcha. Thank you, Teresa, for that in terms of breathing. I want to hear what your stories are, even with regards to the Father's Day celebration. I think that fathers don't necessarily, from my perspective, get the same celebration as mothers typically. And there's a lot of conversation about fathers not being present and not being a part of, the lives of their children. That was not my experience personally. My dad grew up in the South, Eden, North Carolina, migrated here at the age of 13 or 14 and worked really hard to help his mother, my grandmother, who worked in a sweatshop, and then found ways, he talks about day work, as a teenager. He's been working since he was like 14 years old, even before that, and doing day work, and then really just wanting to have a family. And so he did. He married a woman, and, that didn't work out, and then married my mother and had 4 girls, and really wanted to do his very best to take care of his children. And so when I sit with him on the porch, like I did yesterday, my sisters and I am in awe of what he was able to accomplish. He is now almost 85 years young, and he sacrificed a lot. We're going to talk about this later in the week when we have hopefully some police officers on what it feels like to be Black and blue, right? What it feels like to be a person of color, but also wear the blue uniform and have the shield, which is supposed to be about law and protection, right? Not law and order, but serving and protecting. That's the oath that they took, in this world, right? That was the oath. And subsequently with my dad, he, really did the darn thing when it came to taking care of my sisters and I and taking care of my mom. And so we celebrate him. We do the things that were necessary to celebrate all of the wonderful sacrifices that he made to be available to us. And I know that was not easy because he had to stuff his emotion around working as a police officer in a very racist environment during the era of Frank Rizzo. And I didn't understand that as a child. How many of you didn't understand some of the things that happened in your own household as a child? And I didn't begin to understand the sacrifices that my dad made until I became a grown woman. And we began to talk about why he pushed so hard for us to be educated, why he was so intentional. I'll be honest, I thought he just didn't like me, right? Hold on a sec. Mark, can you do me a favor? Can you answer this? This is actually Dad calling, and that's the second time he called. So can you ask him if it's an emergency? My dad was calling me. Hold on a second, guys. Okay, everything is okay. I had Morgan answer the phone because let me say this to you guys. I don't ever not answer the phone for my dad. He's 85 almost 85 when he actually calls. I try to answer the phone, and that was the second time that he actually had called me. And so he actually had like 3 stints in the hospital in 2019, and one was very, very serious. And so I try to answer the phone. He's okay?
he just forgot. He didn't realize he said this. He wanted you to do something, so he just said he'll call him back later on.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. I mean, he can't remember that we have a show, so So listen, my dad is my dude. I love him dearly. He boosted was the first man I ever loved, and he also loves Morgan. Morgan's all right now, so he taught me what it means to be a girl that's loved by a man. And then God sent me Morgan, so Morgan knows how I feel about my dad. I typically don't not answer the phone for him.
Dad will do whatever Dad wants to do. I tell Audrey all the time. Listen, I trade places with him in a heartbeat. This guy. He is spoiled, my goodness. But
he earned it.
Yeah, he did. He earned it. No question about it. No question about it. So he called a little chill, and when Dad calls, you answer the phone. That's what you do. Dad calls.
Honoring
Oh, exactly.
But in all seriousness, I recognize that my dad is almost 85, and there will be a time when I will want him to call. There will be a time when he's not here for me to listen to his voice and talk to him and hear the funny stories and process his quirky things. And, so I, love it. And I honor him on all that he's done for my sisters and I we are where we are because of him. And he basically raised his 3 daughters, as well as my other sister who lives in Alabama. And we all have become successful women, because he said things when we were little girls like, you can be anything you want to be, and you can do whatever you want to do. All you have to do is put your mind to it. And when I had kind of veered off and was like, oh, I'm just going to take my little BS degree and, I'll be fine with that. He's like, no, you said that you wanted to get your PhD. I haven't seen you do it yet. You need to get on it. Do what you need to do. Or stop talking about it. Actually, he basically said, shit or get out the pot. Do what you need to do. And it was from that conversation. And by the way, my mom was basically saying to me, oh, leave her alone. She'll get to it. She's a good girl. She's been doing everything. Why are you so hard on her? And he says, listen, I didn't say I was going to get a PhD. She said she was going to get a PhD. And I have yet to see her do it. So all I'm saying is, if you're going to do it, do it. And if you're not, stop saying you're going to do it. And I was so pissed at him, and I'm crying, I was so pissed that I was like, I'm going to do it, because and he never said I couldn't do it. He just said, stop talking about it unless you actually, be about it, basically. I told you that story, right, Morgan?
I've heard that story a million times. I love that story, actually. But, somewhat of a little bit of not a curveball, but maybe something different. You have a great story, and many Black families have great families, which you came from, and 2-parent households, and you had a wonderful dad who took care of you girls. I mean, you've raised 3 beautiful girls.
Kim and Kelly, and then my sister Malta,
no question.
In Alabama.
But there's a flip side. Many of people whose fathers weren't there, and there's a lot of unresolved issues, underlying issues. There's pain, there's hurt, there's trauma, because many of our fathers, which we know the data shows, haven't been there for various reasons. Some of them haven't been there because of, but no fault of their own. Situations have occurred or fault of their own by choice. So can you speak to that? Because we know for sure in the practice, we have a number of people who suffer from that. And their underlying issues, and those kind of daddy issues follow them throughout their lives and have impacted their relationships. And the Black community are suffering traumas all over the place, and this is just another underlying layer of trauma besides racism, systemic racism that we have to endure. So speak to that a little bit, if you can, because that's an impact on a lot of people. And I'm one for sure, and I know what I went through personally. And so I've gone through it, personally, on both sides, if you will, so.
Well, I mean, that's good, Morgan. I mean, because I do think that for a lot of young girls in particular, we're either, running away from the father image that we knew that was maybe aggressive or absent, we're running towards it because we're repeating the cycle by partnering up with someone who represents the person that we have the unresolved issues, or we're emulating it because we might be mad or angry, about how it is that we either didn't get what we wanted or got something different than what we wanted. And for even men, who are trying to figure out how is it that they learn how to be a good father if they didn't have necessarily a good father. And it's very complicated because sometimes we assume that it's just simply because the person, the dad, just didn't want to be there. But it's just like the insidiousness of systemic racism, the two sides of the same coin. You've got the racist white person who wants to hold on to their power, and they continue to oppress, even from the streets to the suites, right? With these implicit biases. But you also have those persons who are on the other side that have been oppressed. So the same thing in family dynamics occur, where oftentimes these men who are not present, this didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened over years and years and years of slavery that took place where it separated men from women. Women had to watch their husbands beaten and lynched. Husbands had to watch their wives raped. Those atrocities occurred, and it wasn't thousands of years ago. It was 400 years ago. It was, 200 years ago. We know someone, my grandmother was born, right on the edge of slavery, right, with the emancipation. So that those experiences carry with us. You've heard the statement, you can do bad all by yourself, if you will. So the trauma that we experience as a residual effects of slavery still exist, that have huge implications for how our Black males and females repair to one another. Sydney says, and I'll continue that conversation. I spent Juneteenth on the East River Drive, eating lunch, meeting and interviewing positive Black families, and going Facebook Live to encourage Facebook family and address racial injustices. I spent Father's Day cooking and taking breakfast to the home of my father's brothers, who are 78, 92, and concluded with a brunch at the home of my father, who is 90. The brunch was prepared by me, and I surprised him with friends of mine who are pianists and percussionists that rendered songs of gospel melodies. Oh, wow. That's beautiful, Sydney. That sounds like you did the darn thing in terms of celebration. Awesome. Teresa says, my husband has a father wound because he had an absentee father, and his father only showed up when he needed to be disciplined. Got you. I understand. Didn't I
There's a lot of pain out there. And so Father's Day isn't always the rosy picture for a lot of people. It's a day that can be a struggle. Mm-hmm. Like you mentioned earlier, when you were just opening, you mentioned Corey Johnson, who mm-hmm. had that Facebook post.
He is the son-in-law of our Pastor Allen Waller.
Yeah, and he really went raw with it, and kind of shared the struggle he has with his whole father situation. So, many of us are in pain. People are struggling with the whole father situation. I've been blessed, to have a father figure in my life, Gene Austin Jefferson. When my father wasn't there for all my life, for the most part. I only had maybe 2 years with my dad, and then sporadic. Although my dad and I have since reconciled, and we have a pretty awesome relationship now, but there was a lot of years.
Well, that's your forgiveness too, babe.
Correct. And then, as you know, I have my own struggles with my kids right now. Not all of them, but a few of my boys. I have those struggles.
And
so
you were a teen dad.
I was a teen dad, exactly correct. So it was very hard in that situation. You're a teen dad. How do you be a dad and you're a child yourself, doing stupid things? But that's just what the reality was. So, I've had to years of trying to repair my relationship with my kids and my older boys. And so there you have it. It's been a struggle, but for the most part, I think because I was I don't know what, I just always felt a strong desire to forgive my dad. and to want to repair my relationship with him. And not hold it against him, especially I guess because I had my own situation that I sort of continued to curse, if you will, and so in some aspects,
Repeating
and
the cycle, transgenerational patterns.
cycle. So I had to do my own work to do better, to be better, and I got better, and so I think there's a conversation to be had for reconciliation, repair, doing all the heart work, necessary to heal all those wounds. And again, the courageous conversation. That title is just huge. I mean, because there's so many courageous conversations that need to be had. Like we always say, like helping the harm or healing the hurt. And you want to be on the side of the ledger of healing the hurt. That's what you want to be. Again, helping to harm or healing the hurt. And so for you, again, I commend you for the work that you're doing, and I'm glad I'm on this train to help. But so just question some people out there, some people writing some posts. Have you guys had the experience, and have you had some experiences with daddy issues yourself, or know somebody?
Whether you are female and you repeated that cycle by finding someone who, here's the thing, guys, I want you to hear this really clearly oftentimes. And I say this, but I haven't said this on the show. We deal with FOO, right? We call it family of origin as clinicians. And what I tend to say is that our family of origin impacts us more strongly, more deeply, more profoundly, and more frequently than anything else. Where you come from, who you're connected to, what those transgenerational patterns were, what those injuries are. And as a therapist, we do something called a genogram. It's just a family tree. But we go back 3 to 4 generations in our first initial consultation with our clients to really look at that lineage and those connections or those disconnections to see where that pain is, right? Because oftentimes, if you do not work on repairing those injuries, then you are bound to repeat them.
Exactly.
As Dr. Maya Angelou said, she said, I did the best that I knew how to do. And when I knew better, I did better, right? But she also talks specifically about the fact that she had created injuries herself because she came from lack. She came from abandonment, broken home. She came from disruption. And she then passed that on to her child. And so, for many of us, if we don't unpack it, if we don't really recognize it, if we don't understand it, if we run from it because it's too painful, we will take those painful injuries, internal injuries, and we will project them onto the next generation, which is what we don't want to do. Megan says, definitely hated healed from daddy issues. My dad grew up in the Jim Crow South area and was definitely mentally enslaved. Right. That's a good point.
That's it. Mentally enslaved. The slavery of our people, slavery really did some damage. Slavery. Yeah, it did some serious damage to us. Key thing, self-worth in the toilet. You don't value yourself if everybody else around you, your slave master, he's on top of the food chain and you're othered, and not just othered, you're rendered invisible and not worth anything. So why would you value anything? So that's had a residual impact on us. And many of us have been taken away and stripped from our families. So the very foundational components about family togetherness, it was never offered to us as a symbol of value. So it just trickled, and so, it's pervasive, it's pervasive. And it has just really been a poison and a stain on us from a cultural standpoint. Again, clearly, there's a lot of families that, hold up the banner, have done well, stayed the course, and persevered. No question. There's no question about it. But then there's the awful underbelly of missing fathers in our culture. and I guess the data shows in terms of percentage wise, it's affected us more than our white counterparts and our white brothers and sisters.
And you know something,
So,
Dave? You know, even for fathers that are there or moms that are there, you know, there is something to be said for where are you really present? Because it's hard to be present when you're continually traumatized, right?
exactly,
So
exactly.
it's to Megan's point, you know, in terms of having this sort of mental enslavement or a mindset. How on a daily basis when you're going out to war just to work and having to, like my dad, deal with, you know, constant conversation, not really conversation, constant statements using the N word in the workplace. Has to take a toll after a while. And I've been actually even talking to some police officers that are talking about their mental trauma, which is what it is. It's not just post-traumatic stress disorder, but continual traumatic stress disorder. Well, where does it go? Right? You either explode or you implode. But the trauma has to go somewhere. So you become very, very depressed due to the anger and the frustration and the rage, or someone catches it. And usually it's people that are most vulnerable. So if you cannot tell off your boss, if you cannot say what you need to say to the people that are over you that have unearned power, then you go to the people that maybe inside your house that are most vulnerable, and those are the people that catch it, your kids or your spouse. So there's a lot of pain to go around with regards to even those who were present that maybe they weren't present in a healthy way. Megan says, I remember him sitting in our home that he and my mom purchased and said, see, Black people lack the knowledge it takes to buy a home. And she says, cray. Well, here's the thing though. Sometimes, have you ever heard the statement that sometimes we laugh to keep from crying? I think that statement, you know, presents, you know, sort of a microcosm of what that feels like sometimes when you don't even understand the statements that are being made because you didn't experience that trauma in the exact same way. But there is a pain that comes out of even some laughter, you know, around how do I even deal with these injuries. Does that make sense, Dave?
Yeah. You know, there's a conversation being had because it's a question that's been brought up about how does the younger white generation speak to their family members, friends. You know, I think Pastor talked about how, you know, the example last week of the guy in Passyunk section of Philadelphia was tearing down the Black Lives Matter signs, and it was caught on film. He went off at just oozing out all his racism. But what was funny is that his nephew was good friends with the school with the Wilder girls, and so he was mortified his uncle would do such a thing. You know, I don't know if he knew his uncle had racist views, but just now had them socially go viral was like just too much for him, you know. So the question is, how do you speak to our older people? How do you have that courageous conversation with them about, you know, if you have a parent and you're struggling and you know, how do you have the conversation? And they made a statement like what Megan just said. Her father had a statement. She said, cray, laugh out loud. But how do you have that conversation with somebody that's said some injurious things to you as a parent, or may have a view, for example, that you do not believe, you know, speaking truth to power? And how do you have that conversation around those kind of things delicately? You know, some people shy away and don't have a conversation at all and just you know, avoid the conflict, you know, and some will step up to the plate and bravely have the conversation because you're treading on, being landmines of being accused of being disrespectful, you know.
Right. You know, I think that, you know, Pastor is right with regards to there's multiple conversations that need to be had right now. So there's the conversation within our family structure so that we begin to bridge that gap and that divide, so that we begin to, what I did with my dad, to understand all that he had to sacrifice, so that I then developed an empathy for him. And then he then began to have connection with me around growing up in a different era And we began to bridge gaps and have an appreciation for one another with still a level of respect, so that, hopefully we both end up being on the right side of history. But then there's the conversation to have with our white brothers and sisters as well, asking them to have conversations with their family members to begin to move the needle so that we all move together. We're going to take a quick break from our sponsors and we will be right back. So stay with us. This is a great conversation. About to lose you, so we apologize, but come on over to Facebook and YouTube. His phone is battery is low. Hey guys, this is Dr. RG here from the Courageous Conversations Connect space. We are having our quarantine talks, and basically all week we've been talking about we're going to be talking about healing racial trauma, or racial trauma and healing talks. And specifically today, we've been talking about Juneteenth. We've been talking about Father's Day. And we're also been talking about just the dismantling of systemic racism on every level, right? Because as Mel Robbins said last week, there are white people who are on the wrong side of history. And they've been on the wrong side of history, but they've enjoyed unearned power and privilege. They've enjoyed entitlement. They've enjoyed having all of these resources to themselves, even if they didn't earn it. And even my young people that I work with in therapy, they know that they've had to get better grades. They've had to stay, focused in order to just have a seat at the table, i.e., maybe get into a advanced class where their white counterparts don't. They understand the difference between how they are treated in these schools. And by the way, most of my young people, their parents move to the suburbs and they go to many of these schools that are predominantly white, even in the grade school and high school. And so they feel the difference between how they're treated. Darlene says, how do you get people to accept and find positives in blended families? It's worked for me. Well, blended families is another challenge, right? And there's trauma there as well. No one wants to change, i.e., I work with lots of families that ultimately the kids want the parents to stay together. And even if it's traumatic, they don't want their life to be changed and disrupted in such a way that causes them to not have the consistency. I often say kids need consistency, they need structure, and they need predictability. And when that is dismantled or that is fractured, if it's disrupted, then it causes problems. And, we've got to stay in the conversation, but we also have to acknowledge, come on guys, we have to acknowledge that, no matter what the situation is, whether we're talking about a blended family, whether we're talking about just racial discrimination, there has to be some level of acknowledgement. Let's go back for a moment to when we started this whole conversation about quarantine talks and just the virus that, by the way, is getting upticked. There's an uptick in Arizona. There's an uptick in Texas. There's an uptick in California. This virus is not over. And this virus, so we're dealing with two viruses. We're dealing with COVID-19 that doesn't really care whether you're old, young, black, white, Asian, polka dot, red, blue, it just doesn't care. It's still coming at us, right? And then you've got the super spreaders that are going to rallies, for example, the Trump rally that was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we had Black Wall Street and white people couldn't stand it and they burned it to the ground. And so this is where he was going to do it actually on Juneteenth. There's some strategy behind those messages, extremely disrespectful. Simultaneously, though, it elevates the hate. And this is why I keep saying love trumps hate. That needs to be a hashtag that we put out there, love trumps hate. Because, this virus is still spreading. And there's people out there that are not wearing their masks. They're not social distancing. They just want what they want. They want to go out there in the community and act as if this is not happening. So that's one virus, and you have super spreaders. And then there's the other virus. There is the dreaded, despicable, heinous, just, I don't know what else to call it. It's systemic racism that is built based on the underbelly of hatred from the very beginning of the Middle Passage, where Blacks, Africans were brought over here to, the United States, and the initial looting, quite frankly, of this land from the Native Americans. And really, the Native Americans are the only ones that were on this land before anyone else, and it was stripped from them. And then they went over and stole us and brought us here, and then raped and brutalized us for 400 years. So we can't not acknowledge that. So part of this work, this healing work, this anti-racism work is anti-racist work is to accept what really happened, as we talked about with COVID-19. And as we begin to accept it, then we have to adjust our mindsets to a new world, a new and an innovative, reformed, transformed world. As we adjust our mindsets to something very new and we can get creative with that, then we have to, move to a place where we actually adapt new strategy, new skills, new ways of being, new ways of connecting to one another, new ways of being equal, and both all having a seat at the table. That's called adaptation. And we didn't get here this far by not adapting. So we know how to adapt. And then we need to begin to appreciate moving the needle. This is what's happening with these young people out there. They're moving the needle. They're protesting, but there are multiple ways to protest. As our pastor said yesterday about the Cupbearers Challenge. How do you use your resources where you are at? If you're a legislator, if you are a professor in a college, if you are CEO, if you are the head of D&I, right? Diversity and inclusion. I want to go on and say on the record, like, how dare you be the head of diversity and inclusion and not change policy to include everyone? Because that's what it's supposed to be about. Diversity and inclusion. Don't hold the title and not do the work. So begin to appreciate the movement, not the moment, the movement, so that you can then acknowledge a different attitude, because that's what it's going to require. It's going to require us all to change our attitude, to stay focused on educating ourselves and having the knowledge to change policy and practices that have been rooted in white privilege and white fragility and oppression for hundreds of years. And that requires communication and us all being on the same team. Oh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think his name was Mr. Chancellor. And it was in Baton Rouge. It was in Baton Rouge, and they were actually changing. They wanted to change the school that was named after Robert E. Lee. And, this was a school meeting to shift and change the name of that high school. Because really, we don't all know our history, right? There have been times when I've been driving down East River Drive and I see the beautiful statues that are lit up. And I've never, because I'm working so hard, never actually stopped to say, hey, let me just walk and read and see who is the statue of and what does it really mean? Many of us are kind of like that. Like, we're so busy surviving, not thriving oftentimes, that we forget to pay attention to the world around us. So in this hearing, what was happening was this woman, Katie Connie was her name, her first name, and he called her out because she was in a board meeting where they were talking about dismantling racism by taking the name off of the school and replacing it with someone who was not a part of the Confederacy. And she was actually on her computer shopping. And they took a picture of it and called her out and said, it's this type of insidiousness and entitlement and white privilege that we're trying to root out from the very bottom of it in order to eradicate it. So you guys pull up that link. It's all over. It's all over YouTube now at this point. Michelle says, "Hey, Shelly, it's my cousin Shelly. I surprisingly learned this weekend that there's a bastion of single moms identifying as mother and a father." Okay, so tell me more about that, Shelly. Where'd you find that? What was that just kind of in your conversations? If I think I understand it, okay. As a single mom, I never identified as a mom and dad, but if masculinity is associated with financially providing, how can we blame women who do consider themselves as moms and dads? Well, how I would respond to that is I feel like it's time out for the blaming and shaming of anyone, right? Part of having these courageous conversations is to identify where the injury is, because in the clinical work that I do, I see a lot of that. I see that moms are blaming other moms, and moms are blaming dads, and dads are blaming moms, and especially in the Black community, because you can't even speak your opinion without being either an angry Black woman or an absent dad. And so as it relates to what Shelly's talking about with regards to like mom saying they're mom and dad, and if the mom who is actually taking on all the responsibility wants to say I'm mom and dad, I have actually heard that. I've even heard athletes say, they were raised by the mom and the mom played the mom and the dad role. The reality of it is, though, I think that some of that comes from pain. It comes from injury, right? That's where internalized racism comes from. It's really sort of saying, okay, I'm not getting what I need I don't have a seat at the table, and that turns inward. And so I ask people to think about that language. Is it helpful, right? And tell me more. My statement is always, tell me more. Help me to understand more about why you think what you're thinking. And can we deconstruct that? Because usually once we start peeling back the layers, like peeling back the layers of an onion, what comes underneath that is some pain. You're going to cry, because more than likely it's that maybe that mom just feels overwhelmed, or they feel like that they've had to do both roles. The truth is, we know that women can't teach, the sons how to be men, and men can't really teach their daughters how to be women. But there is a valuable role that each person plays. And if that role is not present in that child's life, then sometimes they are raised up with a deficit from that. So if the dad is not there or the mom is not there, I encourage them, well, what about a mother figure? Just like Morgan was talking about with his father figure, Gene Austin Jefferson, who's been amazing in his life. And so that's part of what we have to try to do. Go ahead, baby.
Let me just share this with you. This is a man's perspective. So, Shelly, I hope you receive this in the way it's given, out of love and understanding. I love my mom. I love my grandmother, rest her soul. But there is nothing either one of them could have ever given me what I needed as a young man growing up, and needs yet to be in the United States, as we see. I mean, so much love my grandmother gave me. I mean, she couldn't give me more. She could not have given me more. But the hole that was missing in my heart by not having my father around. Now, I had surrogate father. My uncle, no question, filled shoes for sure. Gave me a lot of the manhood I needed for sure. But needed my dad. So there's no question about it. And your son, Langston, got a beautiful, beautiful boy. He's a beautiful, beautiful kid. And I know you're doing a marvelous job, Shelly, without question. But Langston needs his dad. And I think he's in his life. I'm not 100% sure. So I don't want to get too much into personal business. But the reality is men need.
And also father figures.
Father figures,
like my dad, who's his great uncle, and David, my cousin, things like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But, boys and girls need their fathers. So it's a whole. And and when you go without it, you miss it greatly. All kind of, different things, just to have those conversations and those things that are taught, and just to feel the connection and that male energy. Another thing too is just we just made differently. So
Yeah.
there's certain things that I can share and talk to my son about that his mom can never talk to him about or share, and he's not gonna feel it in the same way. The tone of my voice, the way I smell, my energy, all those things. It's just you're born with it. And a mother could never give that vibe. So I think Megan has a good point. Megan,
I wanted to say that, I think about if like, let's say my mom wasn't present and I was raised by my dad. I remember my dad actually doing my hair, like trying to do it. He didn't do it the way my mom did it, but he would try if my mom was at work to do my hair. And I thought that was so great. The little pigtails or ponytails were like all crooked or what have you. But I can't even imagine my dad saying like, I'm mom and dad. He would have tried his best if my mom wasn't around. Maybe she died when we were young for raising the girls or whatever. But the way my countenance, the way that I dress, the way that I talk, like I studied my mom because I just thought she was so amazing. And I emulated a lot of things after her that I wouldn't have been able to do if she wasn't present. So I think we just have to be sort of careful with our language around that, because I think that there's such value brought about by both that male and that female energy that we're born differently.
Yeah. Megan says,
Megan says moms cannot be dads, period. A mom celebrating Father's Day is like saying all parents matter. Laugh out loud.
Yeah, so right.
That's an interesting point, right? And yeah, right. I love that point, because it really is very similar to when we say Black Lives Matter and then white people say, well, all lives matter. Correct. Nobody's saying all lives matter. And so fathers matter and moms matter. And every child is not afforded, unfortunately, to be raised by mom and dad. And if when that's the case, unfortunately, then maybe having a mom figure or a dad figure in that space, not that they can replace, but they can offer, I think is the right way to go. And I think the other right way to go is to try our best. I mean, Mahatma Gandhi said, we must be the change we wish to see in others. And so I continue to work on my own self as well, with not shaming and blaming people and trying to understand their pain differently and trying to think to myself, well, my mentor, Mrs. Banks, years ago, my second job that I had for the program called Women's World, in my first interview, she said, why do you want to work with women who have addiction, right? And I said, well, I want to help people. And she said, well, if you want to do this job, you have to remember one thing. And I never forgot it, because it's helped me in my entire clinical career. She said, remember, there but for the grace of God go I. She said, remember that they could be you had you been born into different circumstances. And for me, that grounded me and allowed me to see the humanity in every person. And while the differences are important, right? That's what makes us this beautiful tapestry of humanity. It is also important to see the unity and the ways in which we're connected in the human race, and then call each other out in a caring and loving way if we feel like what we're doing is not helpful or healthy.
Correct.
So
just figured I'd share that with Shelly. Hopefully.
Shelly, thank you for the comment. And I hear Shelly saying that she's found that out. I'm assuming it's because she's talked to other people, other maybe single moms that feel like that, or maybe in social media, because there's a lot of shaming and blaming going on in social media. My teen and my young adult clients actually are taking social media detoxes, because there's so much blaming and shaming when people don't comment on something. If somebody doesn't put up a Black Lives Matter, flyer or what have you. And what I want to say is, like, if we're in this together, we got to give each other a little bit of slack, right? And what the slack means is just really, how are you showing up? How are you learning? How are you leading? How are you listening, learning, and leading, right? How are you acknowledging your part and what's happening with you? Then how are you committed? That's the C. Stay in it. Stay in the fight, even if it's uncomfortable. And then finally, are you kind? Are you kind? Right? And the truth is, if we're being honest, there are times when many of us are not kind. My mother used to say, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And so if you're hurting, right, hurt people, take a step back and understand what your injury is about, and then re-engage in the conversation. And I'm not trying to be Pollyannish. I do understand that we're in a fight, and I understand that it requires everybody to be in different position. But once you step back and reflect, if your words have been injurious to someone else, and I've seen a lot of that out there where people are like in social media typing things behind the screen that are injurious, I want to say to people, stop it. Stop it. Speak out of kindness. Be the change you wish to be in others. The golden rule: do unto others as you would have them to do unto you. And if you wouldn't want those words being stated to you, don't state it to other people. Or if you do because you're angry or upset, Morgan and I will tell you we have a quick recovery time. We are not perfect by any stretch. We are not presenting to you as if we don't have our arguments, we don't have our disagreements. If I don't beg myself
Dealing with this one,
because I'm but we have a quick recovery. We say, I'm sorry. We say, I'm a little upset, or I'm feeling a little, uptight because I'm in quarantine. And then we sit down daily, and usually in the evenings, and say, okay, what did we get right? Where are our wins? Morgan taught me this. And what did we not get right in this relationship that is our marriage? And how do we repair it? How do we reform it? How do we revitalize it? How do we give each other our best selves on a daily basis? And we keep trying, because we're trying to fight for each other and for our marriage, and not against it. And I would ask everybody to think about, what are you fighting for? I mean, Shelly said, you are so right, cousin. I call those people keyboard terrorists. It's more important to be nice. Yep, that's what Liz said. And yeah, aren't they? I like that. The keyboard terrorists, like, just stop it. I understand that people are in pain and that they're hurting. We're all in pain, especially the Black and brown people. But that doesn't mean that white people are not hurting in their own ways as well. We're in this thread together, the oppressed and the oppressor. And if the only way that we eradicate this is through love, and we got to check ourselves. Babe, I'm going to leave the last word to you. 11:02.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. This is we're having these courageous conversations. We're walking on the third rail, if you will. We're actually walking on. We are on landmines, and you have to be disruptive. You have to stir the pot in order for change to occur. And there's anywhere in our history, change has never come peacefully. I'm going to say that again. Change has never come peacefully. Mm-hmm. There's always been disruption, and you've had to fight, either physically fight for it. That's what we fight wars for. That's what the Civil War was for. Okay. There was a physical fight. Okay. And then there's a legislative fight. And then there's a mental and emotional fight along the way. And so you got to understand, I've been saying this now, you got to be fit for the fight. So you got to spiritually, whatever it takes for you. If you're a Christian, you pray. If you're Buddha, you know, whatever, or you pray and meditation, all those things. That's why we start the program off with meditation, because that's universally everybody, you know, whether which religion you're in, you can agree, and we all can come together mutually understanding that you can meditate, and it's not offensive to anybody. So we start off our program with meditation to center us, and mindfulness, exactly. It's powerful. I've been doing mindfulness meditation. Matter of fact, I helped her get meditation. I've been doing meditation for years, and really helping. It helped me out tremendously. And but the point is that this is going to be a battle, folks, and we have to continue pressing on in the fight. Continue to make the noise, continue to have conversations, continue to challenge us as a people, because you understand, you know, we caused a lot of damage on ourselves, you know, quite frankly. Let's be honest about it, okay? You know, it's
out of our hurt, though. Hurt people.
I'm just talking about the damage that we self-inflicted issues, and then of course we know what racism has impacted on us and how it's afflicted us. Okay, so we will continue to have the conversation here. We have spent our hour. We're now going past 5 minutes past this hour, and it's been fun, guys. It's been fun.
Cynthia said you should have your own show, babe.
What?
Cynthia says this is why Morgan must have a show to help our husbands.
Well, listen, I do a thing. I do a 2 cent every Friday. I do a week wrap up where I have my 2 cents. It's my personal page. Every Friday morning. There's no set time. I just started doing it random, just having a conversation, and kind of picked up, and people say, "Hey man, you want to continue doing that?" So I'll come on every Friday morning. So somewhere between 7, 8 a.m. to me, I don't go past 10 o'clock. You know, I do it. So it's not something that's going to be a regular show. Just check it out. You know, go into my page and check it out. And you can look
I want to do a 2 cents and cooking show. Because I don't know if y'all know that Morgan is an amazing chef. And I
got you, babe. I got you, babe.
Got to my tummy.
It's usually the reverse. They said, "You're a man, you got to speak to the stomach." But
so sad to see that I'm not the best, chef. She'd be like, "What did I teach you?" I can make her potato salad though. Shelly's have my mom's potato salad.
It sounds good. Potato salad.
I've tried a sweet potato pie, so I'm just trying some things. So anyway, guys.
This has been fun, guys. We will continue to have the courageous conversation. Tell us it's important, guys. We want to grow this channel, and it's really important that we, you guys, the crew, people who are connecting relationships with other planets. Yeah. That's what the crew is. We need you as crew members to go and evangelize for us. You know, talk to people, share, tell your friends that every day tag. Well, not just in conversation, and we also would like you guys to invite people to like the page. You know, so if you want to help us out, invite people to like the page. When we're on, it's important for those on Facebook to give us thumbs up and hearts and so forth. For those who are watching on YouTube, there's a thumb up and thumb down. We need you guys to obviously give us the thumbs up, okay? Give us thumbs up on the YouTube channel. It's very important, again, to gain followers. And those who are watching on Facebook, please go and subscribe on YouTube. That's important. We build that channel up. There's a lot of good things that are coming along the way for the whole Ask Dr. RG brand. We have great, exciting things coming up as we continue through this 2020. We're here. We will continue to do the work. We think this is great work that we're doing. We believe it's great work that we're doing. We believe that this wonderful woman I have here as a wife has a great word. She has a great heart, great platform. She speaks truth to power. And
we have a platform, babe.
Well, okay, we do it together. I'm behind the scenes. I want to give a little extra flavor, give some male energy to the
lots of male energy. Lots of it. You see it moving around, right?
Hey, listen, everybody got their role to play. It is what it is. I do the thing, so it's all good. What they say, Beauty and the Beast, the 1-2 punch. So there you go.
Oh, Deborah says the YouTube link. The YouTube link is Ask Dr. RG, right, babe?
Yes. Go on YouTube. It's Ask Dr. RG. Everything Ask Dr. RG. Whether you Google it, YouTube, IG, Facebook, LinkedIn, it's all Ask Dr. RG. You can pull it up and check it out. All right.
All right. Yes.
So listen, guys, that is it. We've had a great day, and we love you. Right. And we say there's nothing you can do about it, right, man?
We love you. Yep. There's nothing you can do about it. Have a beautiful day on purpose from our heart to yours.
See?